Hey everybody, it's Jose. Today is August 14th, and in 10 days from now, on a Monday, we will begin the first sessions of OTJ's summer sessions. And I gotta say, it has just been amazing to me, the response that we have gotten from the OTJ community, both those who are presenting and those who are supporting the summer sessions. I never expected this level of enthusiasm, this level of energy to come out of this. I thought basically we would get together for that week and maybe have about 10 sessions, and I would do like 1/3 of them, and it would be a chance for us to get together and talk about what we could do to get into the coming semester in October. And I thought, hey, you know who I should talk to about helping me out with that is Adam Jenkins, because he coined this phrase called, this acronym called RAT, R-A-T-T, Reduced Altered Toolset Teaching. I thought this is perfect. He knows exactly the mindset that I agree with. He knows it. I mean, he came up with that acronym. And between the two of us, we started organizing. And no way that we ever thought that we'd end up. Right now, we have like 24 sessions. So that's more than double what we were expecting. And we have some real EFL luminaries coming to do sessions for us. Mark Helgeson, Melody Cook, Charlie Brown, Steve McCarty is going to be doing the first session, starting us off with his ideas on online education as an academic discipline, going all the way to Friday evening into our normal Friday drinking party. I don't even know if this is actually even going to get any bigger going into the next 10 days as we start really going and preparing the schedule. It might get bigger and bigger and bigger. There might still, oh, that's right. I just finished a podcast recording with Simon Morin, and he will have his session put it somewhere into the schedule. So I know that you're not going to see this podcast until pretty much when the summer sessions are over. But I wanted to remark right now that it's just been amazing to me, and it's really a testament to the kind of quality of people that are in OTJ. Okay, today, this is the opening to the podcast recording with Paul Raine. Paul Raine garnered an incredible amount of interest when I put out on OTJ a question collection for him, questions that you'd like to ask Paul Raine. And he came up with a bunch of questions from, not he didn't, the OTJ community came up with a bunch of questions for him. He's famous that way. People know him. So without much further ado, let's listen to Paul Raine.
Good afternoon, everybody. Today we have Paul Raine from TeacherTools Digital with us. And Paul has a wide array of experience with applications for teachers teaching digitally or teaching online. And he's here with us today, and let's welcome him.
Hey, Paul.
Hi, David. Hi, Jose. How are you doing?
Great. Yeah,
good
to have you here. Good to have you.
Thank you for having me.
And how are you doing today?
I'm not doing too badly. I've got a few things I'm looking forward to discussing with you guys.
Are you finished your teaching work this semester?
Well, I work at the same place as you, so that on that account, yes. My other university has also finished recently. Yeah.
Okay.
But there's still a lot of grading and kind of finishing up to do in admin stuff.
Right. So this has been a big semester for everybody with the online switch. Are both of your universities online?
Yeah, one of them announced pretty early on that they were going to be online, and the other one kind of waited until the last minute.
Okay.
And then they decided to go online as well. As for the fall semester, one of them has already announced they're going to be online in the fall, and the other one is still dragging their heels a little bit.
So I presume from your point of view, getting the notice ahead of time is of better
Yeah,
You're able to prepare better, I guess. Would that be the case?
I think so. Although I've been doing digital content for quite a long time, even when I was in face-to-face kind of
Hmm.
teaching mode, I was using digital content quite a lot in my lessons. So I was better prepared than some people. I don't know why that other university wants to leave it to the last minute to make these announcements. I think that's a little bit inexplicable to me. But there we go.
So how did you come about bringing digital, becoming a digital guy and bringing digital into your classroom well ahead of COVID-19? What led you
Yeah.
to that?
So this is one of the things I wanted to discuss actually with you. You know, as teachers, what is our main role? I think one of our roles is the transmission of information, or in somehow helping students to get information, to absorb information in the most efficient way.
Hmm.
That's not our only role, and people would debate. You know, I think in one of your previous interviews, you were talking about, you know, the student is not a cup. We're not filling up the student with water every week.
Hmm.
You know, there's many kind of metaphors to describe what students are,
Yeah.
but I think information is certainly involved in some way.
Hmm.
We all acknowledge that the transmission of information is involved in some way. And whether you're reading from a paper book or from a Kindle e-reader or from an iPad,
Hmm.
it's all different ways of transmitting the same information.
Right.
So that for me was like, well, we have sites like X Reading that have put all of the graded readers into a digital platform.
Hmm.
There are benefits to sites like that. There are benefits in terms of efficiency, in terms of tracking student progress, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So were the kind of aspects that were driving me more towards digital tools and away from paper.
Right.
Yeah.
How long ago was that you started being led into that area or directed into
People who
that
don't
area?
know me, I mean, maybe I'll give a quick bio. I came to Japan in 2006.
Hmm.
At that time, I was working for an Eikaiwa school called Shane.
Hmm.
They at that time they still had cassette tapes. You know, cassette tapes were the main way that they,
Cassette tapes.
yeah, that they
Oh,
actually played audio in the
Hmm.
classroom.
did you say 2006 cassette
Yeah,
tapes?
yeah.
Okay, right, okay.
Because they had no reason to update their technology, because they were getting the students they needed, they were getting the revenue flows that they needed to survive as a company.
Right.
They had no reason to update the technology.
Hmm.
You know, but you know, CDs came out in what, 1980s, mini discs in the 1990s, MP3s late 90s.
Right.
You know, so they've been around for a long time, but education just hasn't really caught up.
Hmm.
And there are good reasons for that. I think one of the reasons is that it's much harder to monetize a kind of amorphous digital sound file than it is an actual physical CD. Companies want to maintain control over their IP,
Hmm.
their intellectual property.
Right.
You know, and it's harder to do that when it's in kind of a digital form.
Hmm. I
But
guess
anyway,
that's
back to my teaching case.
sure.
I just think that for me, it was easier in many ways to use digital devices than it was to carry on using paper in some situations.
Do you think that, I mean, if you, I'm sure there's an age gap here. Like Jose and myself are always teasing each other about our age, but we're on the tail end of a career, you know, with maybe 10 years left.
Yeah, that's true.
Where a guy like you, I feel you're younger than me. I don't really know, but I feel that maybe in your upbringing through your university education and onward, it's probably been more digital than ours has been.
I'm 38.
Okay.
So I came to Japan when I was 24. I'm technically a millennial. I'm kind of on the late end of the millennial kind of generation.
Right.
I never saw YouTube. I mean, YouTube has kind of morphed into something completely different from what it started out as. I remember when I watched YouTube for the first time, it was like the guy on the guitar playing the Canon D, you know, that kind of,
yeah.
and then, you know, the cat videos and all of that. But
Right.
it's now, you've got multimillionaire, you know, YouTubers, you know, you've got academics, you know, it's just morphed into something else completely.
Right.
So, and then you've got sites like Udemy, which is selling courses, you know, mainly video-based courses to students. But I took a very traditional degree. I went to a traditional university. The first time I was kind of a little kind of modern university. The second time I kind of went more traditional because I felt like that's where the money was. That's where the work would be, and that would serve me more
Right.
in my career than the first degree.
And how has that been working out?
Um, Up and down, I guess.
Okay.
I mean, I think one of your previous interviewers mentioned like brand recognition.
Right.
So you're saving yourself a lot of time and pain if the person interviewing you knows the name of your university without you having to explain it and justify it and defend it to them.
Right.
You know, you're saving yourself a lot of kind of hassle and pain, really.
Right.
So yeah, that's part of it, I think.
Sometimes it's not just even a matter of saving yourself hassle and pain.
Mhm.
Sometimes that brand recognition is what completely separates you, even though you're the same person using the same tools, you're teaching the same things, but once you're associated with a name university in Tokyo, and oh, you teach there, okay, well then you must be really good. I'm still the same teacher that I've always been, and I still use the same stuff I've always been, but now that I'm associated with OTJ, people listen to me.
I think there's also
Whatever reason.
a flip side to that is if you do graduate from somewhere like Keio or Waseda or Tokyo, you can't not succeed because people are going to wonder like, well, what happened? What's wrong with that?
Yeah, what's wrong with him? Yeah.
What did you
Yeah,
do wrong?
right. So you don't want to. I mean, if happiness is the ultimate goal, you know, whatever makes you happy in life, I'm not sure that is the ultimate goal, but you know, if it is, then maybe not everyone needs to be aiming for the absolute pinnacle of their, you know, field.
Right.
Right.
Paul, if you don't mind, I want to go back to what we were talking about, how David quite rightly noted that you were really prepared in not in the sense that you were conscious about doing it because nobody was precognizant of the virus coming along, but you were probably the most prepared guy to head into an on-demand or synchronous or asynchronous teaching situation because of all the tools that you already made. And you must have had some kind of expectation going into May or going into June thinking, well, you know, I got all these apps and I'm going to line them up this way and I'm going to do assessment this way. And you must have had some kind of an idea how it was going to go. I just wanted to ask, you know, somebody at your level of preparedness and skill with digital tools, what were your results versus your expectations? What changed your results? Were your expectations too high or things were just way better because you were so prepared? Or how did your results fare now that we're coming into the end of the semester versus your expectations at the start of the semester?
By results, do you mean the actual student grades?
The student grades, your own fatigue level, your own frustration level, if there was any of these things, but just how did you feel that things either turned out the way that you predicted they would, or they didn't turn out the way you predicted you would?
I was kind of vaguely familiar with Zoom. I kind of I knew about it and I had used it a little bit, but I wasn't massively aware of what it actually was for. So that Zoom has become a major part of my teaching at both my universities. One of them decided that we should be on camera for the whole lesson period, you know, and for 100 minutes times 2, and then a break, and then 100 minutes times 2 again. You're on camera for 6 hours, you know. So
wow.
I mean that I think it's different. You are revealing your face to your students if you have a face-to-face lesson, but they're not staring at you intently the whole time. So I think that's a difference between being on camera and being in a physical classroom. And it could potentially be more fatiguing to be on camera for that length of time, I think. Yeah, for sure. In terms of the other stuff, like I do a lot of, I have a lot of games that I've designed myself, games that students can play with each other online at a distance, games that they can do individually, activities, you know, that I've developed over the past 5 or 6 years. That kind of helped me break up the kind of talking head kind of lecture style, you know, lesson. So I think students still need, and also breakout rooms for sure were a real lifesaver. And I actually switched over from Cisco WebEx to Zoom for that reason is that Zoom has breakout rooms. So you need to be encouraging students to work in groups, even if they're not in the same physical location.
And then, of course, the big the money question:
Mm-hmm.
results. How did you feel your
Yeah.
students did? Did they do better in an all digital situation like this, as opposed to you actually being in the classroom with them, delivering the digital tools?
I think I haven't actually worked out the final grades yet, so I can't comment on that.
Well, you're feeling.
But
You're feeling.
yeah, my feeling is that I don't even have a feeling. I'm not even sure because there could have been cases of not cheating, but assessing a student at a distance, you're more likely to have students referring to notes that they have taken in the past or whatever. So I'm not sure how those results will differ from, you know, classroom exam conditions results. I don't know yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
How do you think it will go?
I'm guessing it'll be about the same. I mean, because we tried to reconstruct the course as it was, but just kind of on a distance basis.
Right.
So, and also actually at that university, you have to curve the grades no matter what. So even if they all do relatively better, there's still going to be a curve to the grades, you know. So it's not possible for every student in the class to get an A no matter what.
Right.
You know, there's always going to be a curve.
Did this experience change or enlighten you in any way as to what you consider what a teacher's role is? You know, you talked about those cassette tapes, and one of the jokes that we like to throw around for English teachers in Japan is that, you know, we all had to pay our dues as either ALTs or Kaiwa teachers, playing the role of the cassette player. Are we just disembodied voices? Are we just talking heads? And sometimes, you know, that question can be asked of us a lot, but it would be good to ask somebody like you because, you know, you see these things from different parts. What do you think?
Yeah, it's a very good question, and I want to talk about that at quite length. So, yeah, what is it? What is a teacher? Are they a voice, a face, a body, a brain, a personality, a language model? You know, are we just simply an embodied language model that we somehow by osmosis, you know, transmit that language model to our students? I mean, some teachers believe that, or some parents believe if their child is in the same room as a native speaker, they will somehow absorb by osmosis.
More parents than teachers, I think. But yeah,
Yes.
sorry, I'm interrupting. Go on.
But teachers not so much, yeah, but parents maybe. Or are we more than that? Are we a friend? Are we an inspiration? And I know that there's a conflict between nest and end nest, like non-native English-speaking teacher and native English-speaking teacher. And you know, a non-native could potentially be a bigger inspiration because they've gone through the same thing that the student had to go through. So they can say, well, this is how I did it.
Right.
Whereas native teachers, we learn the language differently. So we have to offer something different to the students, I think. But you know, in terms of, are we a disembodied voice? Are we a voiceless face? Are those things piecemeal, or are they kind of inseparable? What do you guys think?
Dave?
Well, that question, that's the question that Nick D'Annunzio and myself ask each other all the time. What if for example, digital tools and online learning become more prominent, and what part of our job would be phased out, and which part of our job would be most valuable? What is it that we are offering that is untouchable from the digital world or from Society 2.5, as we spoke about yesterday?
Oh, yeah, that was
you know, like, so that question is a difficult question to answer. But some of the things that you mentioned, like being an inspiration, well, you can't separate that from a human, I suppose, right?
And I wasn't trying to imply that native speakers can't be an inspiration. They certainly can. All I'm saying is that we didn't learn the language the same way that our students did.
Right.
Yeah.
We didn't learn the language that they were teaching them. We may have learned another foreign language or a second language that we can incorporate our experiences in that way.
To that, but sorry, Dave. Go.
But sure, but we can be inspirations in multiple ways, not just in how to learn a language, but just in how to guide, you know, how to live a life.
Yeah, how to be a human.
You know, so that's the $1 million question going forward. Because if the digital world starts to interfere with our employment prospects,
Mm-hmm.
which part of us is most valuable going
Mm-hmm.
forward? That's the big question for me. And I mean, I don't know how to answer that yet.
I hope that this situation and the fact that this question is now being considered seriously and heavily by everyone, like, what are we going to do with ourselves? Or is that really what you think of me? That we start pushing back on something that I think that I saw from the very beginning coming into Japan, even when I was working only in English conversation schools. And there's this idea that, we native speakers, and it's almost ironic, it's almost patronizing to be called a native speaker in that sense, because we're looked at as commodities.
Mm-hmm.
I think that
Mm.
if you just get a native speaker and you get him this textbook, the result is going to be the same no matter who the teacher is, because the most important thing is a textbook. And you're just a Scottish accent, you're just a Celtic accent, or you're whatever else. But we people are the commodities, just like these textbooks are commodities, that we don't bring very much that's very important in terms of our own experiences, in terms of our own knowledge, in terms of our own technique that we use to manipulate that textbook. You can see it all the way from English schools, from ALT hires, and even in universities. That basically you just plop a teacher down in front of these 40 kids, and the result will be pretty much the same. Nobody
Mm-hmm.
gets chosen specifically, like your background is in political science, so you should teach this CLIL course on political science, or your background is in computers, so you should teach this CLIL course in coding in English. That's very rare. Most institutions look at us as basically completely replaceable parts. And I hope that
Mm-hmm.
this situation, we can start pushing back on that and saying, we're not these replaceable parts. And that makes it very difficult for everyone concerned. But that starts to get what I think is a backwards attitude in Japanese education, to start looking at us and their own attitudes as to what it is that makes effective teachers, and
Mm-hmm.
change it, pushing forward.
If our voices and our faces and our bodies and brains and all of that that makes us a person as a whole is truly inseparable, then we couldn't even do Zoom classes, because Zoom is an audio visual experience.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's about, well, what is education? To some extent, it's an audio visual experience.
Right.
And for that, all you need is the audio and the visual aspect. You don't need the rest of it, the teacher's family or their health issues or whatever. All you need is their voice and their appearance.
Mm.
You're hypothesizing, or you actually believe that to be the
No,
case?
I'm hypothesizing.
Okay, right.
Yeah, I mean, if that is the case, but
Mm.
I mean, we couldn't have done Zoom if education was more than an audiovisual experience. We couldn't have done Zoom, because Zoom can't replicate anything more than that.
Okay, may I?
Yeah.
I don't think it's a matter of, we didn't have a choice when we went
Mm.
into ERT.
Mm-hmm.
We went into this emergency remote teaching situation thinking that some of us will really succeed, some of us will not succeed quite as well, but
Mm-hmm.
none of us want to be here. None of us think that this situation with Zoom and with LMSs are going to completely replicate what it is that we do bring to the classroom,
Mm-hmm.
simply because of what you just said, Paul. We're more than just an audio-visual experience.
Mm-hmm.
We do try to inspire our students. We do try to bring other parts of our knowledge base, besides just our accents and our reading speed and our textbook and our paperwork. So I'm not sure if I understand you correctly, but number one, we didn't want to go into Zoom.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think anyone, or I certainly wouldn't argue that Zoom, especially in this semester, is any kind of a replacement for what we normally do in a classroom.
But my question would be, what do we do beyond the audio visual? I mean, there is a social aspect to it, and the social aspect is very, very important. And I think James was talking about, let's have online for the kind of information transmission, and the campus for the social aspect.
Right.
And you can socialize online, and there are whole swathes of Japanese population, hikikomori, who only socialize online, or who don't even socialize online. But the sociolinguistic side of it and the kind of the social aspect of language learning shouldn't be forgotten. And we need things like breakout rooms, technological solutions to maintain social interaction. or to encourage social interaction. You know,
Beyond breakout rooms, what were you able to use this semester to encourage social interaction?
you can't. I mean, when you think about the five senses, you've got audio, visual, taste, touch, and smell. I mean, smell's not a big part of language teaching.
or you hope not, because like you weren't able to take that shower that morning. Ooh.
It could be a pleasant aspect of language teaching. I've done activities with my students in the past where they close their eyes and I give them some kind of weird ornament, like omiyagi that I purchased in the past, like a souvenir.
Smells
and
like
they
shrimp.
have to, tell me they have to describe what it is that they think they're holding. But beyond that kind of very, very, infrequent kind of teaching method, I'm not sure if there is much beyond the visual and the audio and the auditory that we actually do in the classroom that makes a difference to the learning outcome.
So if that's the case,
taste, touch, and smell. Yeah.
It sounds like you're inferring that we can, if not replicate, we can produce an online class that is equally as valuable, maybe slightly different, but as valuable, because we can manage the audio and the visual online.
I'm reluctant to come to any conclusions on that, and I'm hypothesizing, as Jose said before. And I think there is a risk, because if that is the case, if education is purely an audiovisual experience, and plus the social aspect as well, which is, I think, a separate matter, or I treat it as a separate matter in this case, then a recording is just as valid as a live session.
Right.
So there has to be something different between live and recorded.
My instinct.
One of the. Go ahead.
Okay, my instinct, Paul, is to, because I'm glad you're bringing this up, because it actually touches on something that I do in my classroom, which I find really separates it from other teachers and what they do in their classrooms, and that is that. Paul, have you seen my demonstration class on YouTube?
Yeah.
Okay. And you see them standing up, getting up, switching chairs, just even that amount of dynamic activity where you can actually get some blood moving through your legs again has its own obvious physiological benefits, but also the ability to hear many, many types of voices, many, many different people, many, many different faces. In the classroom, just in those 60 or 70 minutes of work, is something that a lot of teachers, when they see it, they're actually quite confused, because they've never seen anybody do anything like that. And I would posit, and this is probably part of the evidence that you'd want to weigh if you want to consider this hypothesis further, is that maybe we consider what we do as, perhaps it's primarily, but maybe too heavily only audio and visual, because that's the way we've always done it. And maybe if we worked a little harder to try to find ways to bring literally smell and touch and
taste.
Yeah, well, no, really, a cooking class in English, a cooking class. Yeah, those things. I think we've just never done it. But that doesn't mean that it can't be brought in, and we can't even find data that can say that that's actually a better way to teach. Because I'm pretty sure that, getting those kids to stand up and move around in my classroom helps them with their, with retention, at least with their motivation to come to the class, because it's a different way to study.
There is an approach called a TPR, right? Total physical response, which tends to be used a lot in kids' classes. There's no reason why it can't be used in college classes as well. I just haven't used it that much. The emphasis tends to be more on how many words can you read, how much information can you absorb in those 3 years, and how well can you replicate, how well can you synthesize and analyze, and then create a new set of information from all the information you've absorbed. And that seems to be the role of university, is look at all these disparate sources of information, absorb it, and then reproduce it in a unique way. Right. And then we have, avoiding plagiarism is how well you can make that information unique with your own kind of processing system,
Dave, I interrupted you before. Why don't you?
Just keep moving along.
Okay.
I want to actually introduce a couple of technological kind of things which tie into this. So if you don't mind,
sir. Please do.
Yeah. So in terms of the visual impact we have on students online, we obviously have our camera, which can be heavily kind of manipulated. I mean, we can have a virtual background. I've got the Zoom kind of make me look pretty option switched on.
Oh,
It
wow.
isn't,
Which one is that one? I want that one. No,
it isn't doing a massively good job, actually. But there are systems out there, like there's a PC software called Cam Mask, I think it's called, which will kind of map an animated character to your face.
I've seen that. Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to show you one called Bitmoji. Have you heard of Bitmoji?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, can I share my screen? Has this been done before? Okay, let me just try sharing my screen.
You should be able to share, yeah.
Okay, and if I can share a portion of my screen, let me try that. Okay, are you guys receiving this now?
Yepper.
Yes.
Okay. So this is Bitmoji. It can actually be installed. I think it's part of, it's actually technically part of Snapchat. But you can install it as a Chrome plugin.
Only Chrome?
Yeah, or perhaps also Firefox, but I have it on Chrome.
Got it.
Yeah, but it's a plugin for your web browser. And then what it does, like when you first use it on your, there's also a phone version, an app version. You take a picture of yourself and it converts you into an emoji. And this is my Bitmoji, and it actually looks not too dissimilar to me. I think it's people wouldn't say that it doesn't look nothing like me.
No, it's close enough.
Yeah, it's pretty close. And I think if Jose tried it, it might even return an image with wearing glasses. I think it can detect your major kind of facial accessories and then reproduce them in digital form. And then you can just search for the way that you're feeling and try to express it in an emoji. So you're like, a good job or something. Let's see if that's in there. Yeah, good job. It has that. So if you wanted to, personalize your feedback, and then you can save this image and attach it to your email or attach it to your, send it as a line message or as a whatever you want. So that's one thing I wanted to show you. So, how do we represent ourselves online?
Right.
This is actually very popular amongst MFL, modern foreign language teachers on Twitter. There's a hashtag called MFL Twitterati.
I can think of at least 3 people I know on OTJ who use this as their icons or use it often. Yeah,
I use it on my my Facebook profile.
I didn't quite know how to do it, but I watched. There's a woman I watch who talks about how to use the Google Suite for American kids in a regular classroom, not an EFL classroom or ESL, and she's using the Bitmoji for her caricature or her character, and it's quite interesting. But I didn't realize that it's just an extension on Chrome, right?
And we all want to portray idealized versions of ourselves. You don't want to be on camera with a bad hair day, looking hungover and whatever, and a messy room behind you. So if you take away all of that and just have a cartoon version of yourself, it's always going to be the ideal version, rather than the actual real version, which is less than ideal.
Right.
Because humans are less than ideal and we're not perfect. And, this was a discussion on OTJ was like, why don't students turn on their cameras? A lot of teachers had problems with students refusing to or not wanting to turn on their cameras, and it's because we feel exposed and vulnerable, and maybe girls in particular might not want to be on camera if they haven't got perfect makeup or whatever, but boys as well, boys and girls, What do you guys think about that?
Well, that's interesting because to some degree you have to be a bit vulnerable, but at the same time, you're raising a really good point. Is what are the reasons that students would choose not to be on camera when at least in my class it's mandatory, right? So what are the cases and what the excuses? We know what the excuses are. My Wi-Fi is not good today, or what have you, right? But I had kids for the whole semester who did this.
Yeah.
Right. Just the top of their head, right? And something's up, right? They don't want to show themselves. They don't want to expose themselves. So I think it's a real phenomenon. It's a real human characteristic.
At neither of the universities where I work did they institute any kind of mandatory cameras always on policy that they passed on to the kids so that then the teachers would find it easier to see their students' faces. It was always their choice. And I think to some degree we were told at one university that if a student doesn't want to turn on their camera, please don't force them. But when I was seeing reports or stories from other teachers about how these kids weren't turning their cameras on in their classrooms, I was kind of wondering, what is it that I do, or what is it that I can say? Because in every one of the 11 classes that I teach, when a kid is in my class, maybe for the first week, I would have to remind them, hey, Toshi or Mr. Tanaka, you forgot your camera. And, oh, you turned your camera off again. But I don't have to do that anymore. And I never had to do it that much. And I think it was partly how I introduced the whole idea of turning on your camera.
Mhm.
It was how I brought it into them. And then when there was some success, you'll get this, what's the word I'm looking for? This critical mass of students. When you've got more than like 65% of the students with their cameras on, that starts to put peer pressure on the others to turn their cameras on.
Mhm.
Which then, if it starts approaching 80%, then it's a pretty much total peer pressure to turn your camera on, because it's so much easier for the teacher to see when you don't have your camera on. But I didn't get any kind of a problem at all ever to get students to turn their cameras on, even though there was no mandatory rule for it. And I was wondering what it was that other teachers might be doing themselves to sort of make their students hesitant to turn on their cameras. Was it because the teachers are maybe unknowingly putting up a very stern face? Was it because the teachers were just a little bit too enthusiastic and in kind of an over enthusiastic way? They were trying to sell themselves too much. You would actually have to sit there and watch that teacher for the first 3 weeks to say, this is what you were doing wrong. This is why students weren't turning on their cameras. I don't know what I did, but I know that I still do have 100, I can say that 100% success for getting cameras on.
To qualify that camera rule, it certainly wasn't something that teachers like Paul and I made. The university set
Yeah.
up that whole system for us ahead of time. It wasn't, I use the word mandatory, but it was expected.
Right.
With the odd student who didn't have a camera or whatever, didn't have
Broken
the technology.
camera, broken. Yeah, that's,
But-
can't help that.
But
I think that's part of the attempt to make the online experience as close to the physical as possible. And in the physical experience, you can always see every student's face. In theory, I mean, in the past, I have had students a long time before COVID was a word, who would come to school every week wearing a mask.
yes.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I never saw their real face because they didn't want, you know, they were shy, they had social anxiety or whatever, or they just didn't want to show their face. And so I never knew what they looked like.
Yeah. I had his almost the same, sorry, almost the same student, always wore like a supersized mask, the biggest mask he could find, wore not sunglasses, but big, heavy, thick, chunky glasses, and combed his bangs down so that it was pretty much covering his eyes, just enough so that he wouldn't bump into pillars in the building. And I too, I probably couldn't recognize that kid if I saw him walking down the street at me, you know, except for the fact he was a bit of a big kid, but you know, that's not enough to recognize anybody. Right.
Speaking of the kids who have a difficult time socializing and do want to hide, I had one student who reported in her final essay about her junior high experience of not going to school because she didn't like being with other people, and how much this online experience has liberated her.
I could
she's
see
been
that.
able to flourish in an online classroom.
Yep.
So
Alex Burke, a member of OTJ, mentions that this is actually a boon for some kids who would actually like to study, but just can't get over their panic attacks or their own whatever. I don't want to say the word affliction because I don't know if that's not the right word to use, but their own inabilities to adapt to a normal classroom. And that these are kids who probably would have just stayed at home and wouldn't have even cracked open the textbook. But now, like you say, Dave, they've got a brand new set of opportunities.
I mean, and Japan's population is in chronic free fall. And no one's really talking about that aspect of it. I mean, what do you guys think about that?
Well, prior to COVID-19, I picked up this book, which I don't have with me today, but it's roughly titled Teaching at Universities in Japan. And one of the things they refer to is there's this myth of declining population affecting universities, where that universities have stayed off that phenomenon by accepting more international students and students who are older students. So they've been able to mitigate this declining population. And now I would say with the the abilities of online learning, you may be able to attract even more students who are, say, older, who wouldn't normally fit into a normal model of a university student being 18 years old, graduating from high school. So if you're if you're leading towards is the declining population going to affect us as university teachers,
Mm-hmm.
I'm in the camp of maybe not.
Mm-hmm.
I
But
think it depends. Sorry, Paul, go.
Oh, go ahead, Jose.
I think if you look at it in different time frames, if we're talking about the next 5 years, I would agree with Dave. There's not going to be just a gigantic shock. Although, just staying within that 5-year time frame discussion, everyone should go look up a guy named Scott Galloway on YouTube. He's got a few videos that have gotten a lot of hits, so you'll find him by his name, Scott Galloway. And he's a professor of marketing at New York University. And he has had a lot to say, even before the pandemic, about what he calls the walking dead among universities. That especially because of the pandemic, that what's going to happen is brand universities like Harvard or Yale, they're not going to have any problem at all in terms of their enrollment for at least the next 5 years, even after this pandemic, because all they have to do is just say, well, no, we'll just accept more students. Before, they were a little bit afraid to actually increase their enrollment target because, that waters down the name Harvard. But now, if they sense any kind of an enrollment problem of kids going into Harvard, they say, no, we'll just make it easier for them. We'll just start bringing in kids who normally would have gone to second-tier universities. So what does that do to second-tier universities? Well, they have to do what they have to do, and they look at Harvard doing what they're doing. Okay, well, let's just expand our standards, or literally lower our standards for the students coming in. And that creates literally at Harvard a lower standard of student, and at these second-tier universities too. But what Galloway was talking about with the Walking Dead universities are those third and fourth year post-secondary institutions who normally are there, I don't want to say bottom of the barrel, but kids who don't want to go to universities. There are all these expanded opportunities to go to universities for these kids. And these lower level post-secondary institutions, community colleges, technical schools are going to have a huge problem trying to fill their enrollment, because eventually those kids are going to go somewhere else. But if we're talking about the 10-year frame, the 15-year frame, no, we're looking at the same numbers that the labor ministry, the health ministry, and the government itself is looking at, that by 2100, the population of this country is going to be down to about 80 million, 85 million.
Can I share some my screen again? 1 second.
Go on, man. Yeah.
Just to put some numbers to this conversation. Okay, so this is an article that I found a few months ago. Oversupply, lack standard weigh down Japan's higher education system. So it says here, many university education specialists expect at least 100 of Japan's 605 private universities to go under in the next decade.
Yeah, I
am so puzzled why they are setting up more universities in Japan. Yeah. If you understand simple economic principles, the colleges will not be able to survive, says Yutaka Moroshi, professor at JF Oberlin University. And then he notes that about half of all private universities cannot gain enough students to meet quotas. Yeah. If you look at the next section here, it says, Japan's National Institute of Population and Social Security Research predicts the population of 18-year-olds will fall to 12 million in 2015. We've already passed that point. 8 million by 2030 and 6 million by 2050. So, yeah, I mean, Dave mentioned a possibility that universities could start recruiting people outside of that age range, like mature students, for example, retired businessmen, housewives, etc. But that's the Eikaiwa industry. I mean, those students are already studying English in Eikaiwa schools.
That's from an English point of view, but from a...
Oh, right. Yeah, of course. Yeah, that's true. I mean, they might go to university to study something else. Yeah.
Right. And once there, they might take an English class.
Paul, just as a matter...
I just wonder whether that's enough to fill in, this massive drop in 18-year-olds that we're going to be...
We'll check out your statistic from 2015 and then take a look at Oberlin University. Mm-hmm. How has it affected Oberlin University?
Well, I don't know how it has. I mean, what's the reason for the outsourcing there? Is this connected to that or not? I don't know.
Not one drop when they've got when they've been told to reduce their enrollment because they're over capacity.
Paul, just quickly, if you could at some point, either at the end of our conversation or so, because I want to be able to put this up at the top,
Mhm.
up there,
Mhm.
either a bibliographical reference to the article you just read or a
Yeah.
URL to it, just anytime you want in the chat. I would
Sure.
appreciate
Yeah.
it.
Do
Um,
we
yep.
are we interested in taking a little tour of going back to TeacherTools Digital? I mean
Mhm.
that's something I'd like to take. We'd all like to take a look at today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How has that been going since COVID-19?
Pretty good. It, it I had that project a few years before this ERT situation arose, and I was kind of publicizing it a little bit through Gelt and things like that. And then when we all found ourselves teaching remotely, I kind of went into overdrive on that project and trying to push it out to as many people as possible. I want to create a useful tool that makes people's lives easier and makes them more efficient teachers. I mean, in your interview with James, he was saying that he wants to save time, he wants to increase efficiency, and I
Cut
think
down the donkey work.
yeah,
Yeah.
the donkey work. All teachers want to do that. Nobody wants to be sitting at the end of the semester with a huge pile of papers to grade, and teachers want to avoid that if possible. At the same time, giving valuable feedback to the students. You can't just get rid of the feedback altogether and just go, okay, well, I won't do any grading. There has to be feedback, but how do we make it more efficient? Yeah.
And how do we? Like, what did you do to do that?
Well, one way you can do it is with tests that can be graded with a computer easily. So let me show my screen one more time. I'll show you TeacherTools.digital. 1 second. So TeacherTools.digital covers all 4 skills of English. So you've got listening, reading, speaking, and writing. You have 8 assignment types: audio recording, multiple choice quiz, read aloud, text gap fill, text to test, video gap fill, video recording, and written reports. I think Dave has used a few of these in his lessons. Is that right, Dave?
I'm using the audio recording frequently and the text gap fill frequently.
Mm-hmm. So, for example, with the audio recording, what you can do is you can require the student to transcribe their own audio, and then you can analyze the transcript. So this has a pedagogical value in the sense that the student is not only speaking, but they're also listening back to their own speech and then transforming that into written language.
Mm.
So there's a kind of double pass on the language, the written aspect and the spoken aspect. But also, when the teacher has the transcript, they can read it while the student is speaking, and they can also analyze the transcript much more easily than you can analyze a video. You can analyze it linguistically, grammatically. Having it written down is much easier than trying to do that on the fly while watching a video. The TOEFL actually uses computer assessment and a human rater. So they have a combination, they have a hybrid grading system where it'll go through 2 passes. First of all, a computer rater and then a human rater. The TOEFL online practice test, TPO or TOPO, only uses computer rating. And ETS, actually, the company that runs TOEFL, is one of the companies that's pushing forward the automation of exam assessment in Japan and elsewhere. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's totally automated within 5 or 10 years.
What do you think, Paul, about that? Perhaps you've heard about this, that maybe around end of May, start of June, the MEXT, the Ministry for Education here in Japan, said that they're going to make a big push for, very vague word, digitization of class materials and an extended push of using AI chatbots to help students with perhaps at least the more mundane questions, like when are the photocopiers open during the testing period and stuff like that, and stuff like when is my professor's class hours during Obon and stuff like that, and using digital chatbots and make a push to actually create or push the envelope for a larger range of things that these AI chatbots and these digitization tools or methods can bring to universities in Japan. Did you hear about that? Do you have an opinion about that?
I kind of heard about it. I did hear that they were trying to replace the entrance exam with TOEFL. Is that connected to that?
Could be. This
Mm,
was all so vague, and it was written
mm,
in Japanese. The one article that I read, and I can't always
mm,
trust my Japanese, but very clearly, digitization of university classrooms, whatever classrooms means, and a higher use of AI chatbots
mm,
for whatever, right? Because it wasn't clear.
mm. I mean, in terms of in terms of conversing with AI, there are several levels to overcome. So first of all, you have speech recognition. The computer has to be able to understand, has to be able to convert the sound waves into words.
Hmm.
Okay, and then you have natural language processing, so it has to be able to figure out what those words actually mean. And then you have the kind of social linguistic level where it has to be able to figure out an appropriate response to whatever you've said. Most chatbots that I've encountered, they can reply to you. Like if you ask Siri a question, it can give you an answer, but it can't actually instigate the conversation. Whereas I think what we do in our daily jobs is we instigate the interaction. 9 times out of 10, a
Right.
student will not be willing to instigate the conversation.
Hmm.
And it's our job to try to instigate. And I always say, answer, add, ask. So whenever someone asks you a question, you answer it, you add a piece of information that they didn't ask for, and then you return the question. This is something, a little acronym I learned back in my Eikaiwa days,
Hmm.
answer, add, ask. So it's all about how to maintain a conversation. And chatbots aren't good at maintaining conversations yet. Some of them can, but not as well as they would need to be able to make a useful pedagogical exercise, I think. There is actually one called Mitsuki. Have you guys heard of Mitsuki?
Go ahead. No, I haven't.
Let me see if I can find Mitsuki.
That sounds like a person's name.
Yeah, it is. Mitsuki chatbot. 1 second.
I'm getting confused with the word bot.
Hmm.
Is that what you're saying? Is that a
Yeah.
BOT?
Yeah, a chat bot, a chat robot. It's taking the
Okay.
two.
Mm. So this is Mitsuki. It looks like they changed the name to Kuki.
Mitsuki.
Yeah, and the Logan Prize is a prize given to basically chatbots, the most kind of realistic, the most human-like chatbots. I think it's kind of connected to the Turing test. The Turing test is when the person can't tell that they're talking to a computer. So if you're chatting online and you can't tell whether the person you're talking to is human or a computer, then that has passed the Turing test.
So this is a chat bot that's cutting edge, close to meeting or passing the Turing test.
I think it either passed it or it did the best out of all of the entrants to that prize.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I have tried it, and it actually does respond pretty well, but it doesn't respond to speech. When I tried it, it was just like a messenger application. So you can type a message in, but I guess you could use the text-to-speech function on your phone.
When it responds, does it respond in speech or does it respond in text?
It responds in text, I think. I think it depends on which version of the chatbot you're using, but the one I tried responded in text.
It wouldn't be that. I mean, it'll be a few lines of code to take that text and slap it into a voice, and that's not even the hardest part of making a chatbot.
Yeah. I don't know why they haven't done that yet.
Yeah, I was thinking. Well, wait, why wouldn't they? Well, okay, they didn't. So.
Yeah.
Paul, can we go back and look at a few more of your
yes, please, let's do that.
examples.
1 second. So in terms of, I was talking about speech recognition. So speech recognition, many people are familiar, at least a little bit familiar with speech recognition these days. So there are kind of two kinds. One is just you're trying to figure out what the user said and whether it was comprehensible. And the other is actually giving them feedback on their pronunciation. So one is saying if you want to develop a native speaker-like speech, then we need to show you how different your voice is from the model that you're aiming for.
Yeah.
And that's a controversial claim because pronunciation is notoriously difficult to actually master. You know, the other kind of approach is saying, well, as long as they're comprehensible to the people that they need to talk to, then that is a good enough pronunciation.
Right.
Topic. I think what Jose asked me about how my site makes teachers' lives more efficient.
Right. How it helps.
And then we got onto speech recognition. But let me just share that tool one more time.
Go ahead.
Please.
I can close the loop.
I'm sorry if we're distracting you. Sorry, man.
Not at all. So if you want to know that a student can pronounce a sentence in a comprehensible way without listening to them yourself, that's where my site could be useful.
Let's
for example, I click on the mic button. May the force be with you. The computer listens, analyzes my speech, compares it to the text, and then marks it green or red. So in this case, I pronounced it all correctly. If I just said, may the force, it highlights that part in green and the rest in red because it wasn't actually said.
Are you hooking into some kind of API here, Paul?
There is an API, a speech recognition engine that is doing the kind of the grunt work on this. Yeah,
you can do that stuff. You are.
Could you do this again with like a mispronounced version of the word force?
Well, this is what I was talking about before. My system, this system I'm showing you now, knows what you're trying to say.
Okay.
It has the text. So if I gave you this text and then I had a student say it and you were looking at the text, you would know they were trying to say that text. So you would kind of, your comprehension would be aided by the fact that you knew what they were trying to say. So my system, this system that I'm showing you now, is not for fine-grained feedback on pronunciation.
Okay.
Yeah.
What is it for? How would you describe its main purpose?
Fluency building. You know what Jose was talking about. Can they string 4 or 5 words together? Can they string 2 or 3 sentences together?
So it's listening as much for the melody, the rhythm, the speed of what is being said, as much as the actual its similarity to the words that are supposedly being targeted.
There are, I think there's about 20 or 30 variables. It basically analyzes frequencies, and it's based on machine learning. So you feed the system thousands and thousands of hours of native or usually native speaker English, and then the machine figures out what each word in a written form is supposed to sound like in a spoken form. But this is what we're talking about, because someone with French as a first language could be learning English in order to converse with his German-speaking business partner, right? So in that sense, they don't need to emulate native speaker norms because there's no native speaker involved in that relationship.
That's right.
This came up somewhere recently. I don't know if it was with us, Jose, where most Japanese learners will not actually interact with native speakers from say a business point of view. It might be more with a Chinese English speaker or a Korean English speaker, or
I don't think it was us, but I completely agree with that.
Okay. Yeah, forget where that came up. It was recently that this came across my desk.
And it's true. I mean, if these kids get hired, they're not going to be working, you know, at a job at a very, very quickly at a desk where they're going to be immediately be speaking with native speakers. If that guy is actually working in the same company, working across the desk from me, that guy, that American, that British guy probably speaks Japanese. But what they will need to do is be able to speak English with people from Singapore, people from Malaysia, people from the Philippines. Now, those are pretty high-level English-speaking countries, and those people probably will have very close to near-native pronunciation. But if we're talking about Cambodia and Vietnam, trading companies in maybe even Taipei, where they're not as good as, say, Indonesia or Malaysia, then they not only do not need to be able to speak like a native speaker with near native pronunciation, they need a more important skill. They need to be able to take non-native pronunciation and actually process it themselves. That's a much more important skill.
Now I know where I got this thought. It's from Abex have produced textbooks with non-native speakers doing the speaking or for the listening example, so the kids are getting a chance to listen to a wide variety of non-native speakers.
That's why I was targeting, a lot of the foreign students that would come through one of my universities, because I wanted to get Italian accents on there, Romanian accents on there, Australian, like hard Australian accents on there, because these are not the kind of accents that you will hear on a lot of textbooks. And that to the guy who was yelling, "Yo, American English Standard," if that is all that you put into the ears of your students, they're going to have a really hard time with Indian accents, Sri Lankan accents, Pakistani accents, Chinese accents. Yeah, that's the target. But if that's the only thing you're going to expose them to,
Can I jump in and give one more example from the site here?
You don't have to ask. Stop asking. Stop asking.
Please do. That's
what
we're
here for.
It ties into to accents. So you're talking about exposing your students to a range of accents.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the other day I made an assignment to demonstrate this. It's about Australia, and I based it on a Wikipedia article about Australia. And let me see if I can find it now. 1 second. Yeah, I have a text-to-test activity where you paste a text and it will generate a listening, reading, vocabulary, and grammar.
Oh, this is the one I wanted to see. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So Australia, I typed in I copied and pasted a text from Wikipedia into here. I also copied the image from Wikipedia because it's Creative Commons, so there's no copyright restrictions on Wikipedia content.
Okay.
So I've got an image, I've got the text, and then I actually chose the voice. And the voice here, I have Russell, who is an Australian speaker. Right, so I'll demonstrate this to you in a second. And then I have the vocabulary is all automatically generated. So I don't have to write the definitions myself. I only have to check the words that I want to actually test the student on. Yeah.
Well, how is it defining them?
There's a dictionary.
Okay.
And it scans the text and figures out what the most, it figures out which words it knows, and then it provides, yeah. But if you want to actually customize them, you can do.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is awesome.
And then there's also a grammar section. You can check which sentences you want to test your students on. And then if you click on preview, the first screen will be the image and the text, and then it has a sound file. As you listen, it will highlight the sentence that is being read. So let's try it. Oh, let me just share my computer audio, so it will improve the
yeah,
sound
absolutely.
quality.
Yeah, that's important. Yeah.
Okay, here we go.
Australia is a country and sovereign state in the Southern Hemisphere, located in Oceania. Its capital city is Canberra, and its largest city is Sydney.
There you go. So
Yeah,
I think you can detect the distinctly Australian accent.
That's Australian,
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, still, we're not at... I can tell that voice is synthesized, but it's improving massively over time.
Well, it sounds like it's at least as good an Australian synthesized accent as any Canadian synthesized accent or any accent. You've heard them; they all sound that way in terms of their synthetic.
Can you on the fly change the nationality or the accent? Could you go back and just edit quickly?
Yes, I can. Yes. I don't think we have Canadian English, unfortunately. I would otherwise.
Oh, that's okay.
If you don't want to, you
don't want to hear that, eh?
We do
take
have
off, eh?
Canadian French. We have Canadian French.
Celine Dion. Let's put Celine on. Yeah.
Everything's a big flourish at the end.
Pop Celine in there.
I mean, these are actually designed. My site, TeacherTools, and one of the reasons I changed the title, the name of the site from EFL to TeacherTools, is because I wanted it to work with other languages as well.
Sure.
So TeacherTools actually works if you're a French teacher, a Spanish teacher, or a German teacher.
That's amazing.
Yeah, as well as an English teacher.
So let's listen to Celine
Dion. Yeah, that's pretty good.
Celine, this is actually
pardon us if we start giggling at the end of this.
This is actually optimized for French language. So do you want to hear a French voice reading an English text?
I wanted to hear Celine Dion, to be honest with you.
It's not Celine Dion.
But Canadian French. So I was just
Canadian French. I think was Leah. Is that a Canadian French name?
Leah could be.
Maybe Matthew.
Anyone will be
but
fine.
But Latoya could be a Canadian French name. So where it's 2020, you know.
What about a British accent?
Okay, good enough.
Brian. Brian is a kind of classic.
Not Kevin.
It's not our Brian that we are.
And then go
Retired
to
Brian, is it?
The Life
play,
of Brian.
and then preview. And by the way, you mentioned ABAX. I actually made ABAX's LMS as well.
Is that right?
Nice. You made it. You mean you wrote
Yeah.
it from scratch?
ABAXLMS.com. Yeah, I wrote it from scratch. Yeah.
Oh, we
It
gotta
wasn't
talk
based
more.
on anything. You wrote it from
No,
scratch.
I wrote it from scratch. Yeah.
You
And
awesome guy.
I highly recommend ABAXLMS.com.
Okay.
I promised Alistair I would mention ABAX.
Well, I want to get him on here too.
Yeah. We
Okay.
have such a anyway. Let's hear not Celine. I was about to say Celine Dion. Let's hear whoever this is.
Brian.
This is Brian.
Australia is a country and sovereign state in the Southern Hemisphere, located in Oceania. Its capital city is Canberra, and its largest city is Sydney.
I feel like I want to storm the beaches at Normandy.
There is a kind of Winston vibe.
Yeah, it was a
there.
Winston vibe there. Yeah.
You can also slow it down to 80%. You can add pauses between the words.
That's important.
Yep. So if we set the voice again now, listen again. Update.
I don't know about anybody else. You're convincing me to really take this for a real
This,
ride.
yeah, this is, I mean, I've only used a little bit of your site because I could only allow my brain to learn so much.
And this is deep stuff.
Ready?
Go.
Australia is a country and sovereign state.
Yeah. So there I put
Okay,
a
yeah.
pause in between every word.
Yeah.
He sounds like he's talking down to me. Hey, you! Why can't
So-
you understand?
So, Paul, let me be the dummy in the room. Okay, so you take some text from somewhere that you've chosen. This particular part of your website will convert it into an you can connect it to an audio voice. It'll extract vocab. It'll extract grammar examples. And how are you using this for your students? In actuality, they have to do what?
They have to respond to the actual question. So I'll show you what the student side looks like. 1 second.
Okay.
Yeah, I think a lot of people would actually like to hear how Paul Raine teaches his class.
Yeah.
A combination of things, but I mean, I do use this as a large part of it. And if you're doing these kinds of activities in a textbook, then I think you may as well, or it's even better to do them through online, digitally, because you can grade them automatically.
Mm-hmm.
So the limits of how much you can personally grade in a semester is not an issue. The limit becomes, how much work is optimal for the student.
Right.
Then, you see. So let me
Right.
go to.
That's a discussion that's ongoing.
Yeah. Text to text. This is what the student will see. They'll see the image, the text, and they'll have the audio.
Mars is the fourth planet from the Sun in the solar system.
It's Brian
It is
again.
the second smallest solid planet.
Yeah. And then next, this is where they see the word definitions.
Yep.
So they can try to memorize these, or if they already know them, they can check them.
Wow.
And then the next page, they have to match the definition to the prompt.
Okay.
Wow.
So carbon dioxide, crater.
That's awesome. Now, let's say I'm a teacher and I want to see these results. So I send the kid to the site and I tell them, go do the work. And how do they show me that they've done the work? Do I have to sign up, or do they the students have to download something as a result and then send it to me by email? How did you design that?
So students do not log in at all. This is one thing I wanted to avoid, because onboarding, getting students enrolled in an LMS it can be a major headache. So I kind of, the way I describe my site is a bit like Google Forms. Have you ever used Google Forms before?
Yeah, sure.
Yes.
Yeah. So you create a questionnaire on Google Forms. You give the person that you want to respond a link. They respond, and then the response is recorded on your account. So that's the way my site works, is that the teacher creates an assignment. They give the student a link. When the student submits the assignment, they input their name or a student number or email, or a combination of those three. And then the response is recorded on the teacher's account.
Excellent.
Yeah. So
That's very wise, because most teachers know how to. When you just say Google Forms, it's easy to completely imagine what that is, right?
But Coming back to Jose's point about where are the results actually stored, if I show you a submission, so I'm going
Careful
to,
about any names that might appear, right?
oh yeah, this is an empty account, so this
Okay,
has
good.
no name. So if I go to let me go to video recording, click preview.
And can these results be arranged by folders or by class? Like if I'm using this at 2 different universities and 5 different classes,
Yes.
will it fall into those folders so it's easier for me to organize things?
Yes, we have a folder.
Excellent.
There is a folder system, so you can create a folder for every class that you teach, and
Excellent.
then you can keep the assignments for that class within that folder.
I
Excellent.
could show you mine in a second. That way you could see like a real, like not a real teacher, but a non-site building teacher's.
Are there going to be a lot of names in there though?
0 names.
Okay, good. Okay.
Yeah.
So start. My question is, do I think snakes would be a good pet? So I read the question, click on record. I think snakes would be amazing pets because they could help keep your apartment free of rodents. I click stop, click submit.
That's a pretty good answer, Paul.
I've submitted this one a few times.
Oh, you've had practice. Okay.
I've had practice.
You're good at English. Okay.
And then if okay, that video is now submitted. If I go back to my folder, preview assignments. Actually, I need to create a tutorial video for every assignment. Really, that's on my to-do list.
Good thing to do this summer.
On the right side, you can see 1 out of 100. Click on that. Click on View, and then that will be in there. I can see the date it was submitted, the name of the submitter, and the video.
Excellent.
Yeah, and I can download it here. Or here, or here. I can also enable a transcript for this video. So if I want, I think I mentioned this at the beginning of our interview. If you want students to be able to transcribe, or if you want to have a transcript of what they've said, then the student self-transcribes, and that functions as a pedagogical activity as well as a time-saving and efficiency-boosting thing for the teacher.
I'll tell you, Paul, it's been a lifesaver for TOEFL class because, like, I want to see what. And I don't want to type it up, and I don't want them to type it up in a separate class. They do it before they finish the assignment. They have to type it up, and then they hit submit. It's amazing, very amazing.
Right. So I want to come back to something about efficiency, and I want to kind of contradict myself a little bit. I actually save other teachers' time by developing these tools, but I don't necessarily save myself time. So this is something I noticed, like in James's interview, he said like he wants to save time, and I think all people who develop or who feel the urge to be innovative, they're kind of trying to be more efficient.
Right.
So I have a question. I kind of have an idea, and then I have a question. So I'll read the idea, and then I'll give you the question. So the idea is, how much more work are you creating for yourself by trying to create technical solutions that are designed to save you work? And I call this the Doraemon dilemma. Are you familiar with Doraemon?
Of course, but how is that? Okay, keep going.
Let me finish. So his inventions, Doraemon's inventions, always end up ultimately making life more difficult for not people.
Right. Okay. Now I get it.
And then my last bit is, it's not just creating the solutions; it's persuading people to use them and training them how to use them.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
So I've invested thousands of hours of my time into this site. Then you have the thousands of hours marketing and promoting and informing people about the site. For example, this webcast. And then there are thousands of hours associated with actually training people how to use the site.
That's right.
And only after you've gone through all of that time, then perhaps you're going to start saving time. You know, I think teachers using my site will save time immediately. But for me, developing the site, that's not
Right.
the case. Yeah.
Can I give you a suggestion then? I don't know if you've ever considered this, but I found that one of the things that people liked and that gave me a reputation was that instead of just being known as this guy that knows stuff and trying to be helpful to people when they ask questions, which I still do, but I made a series of videos about Zoom, which themselves became really popular. And I'm wondering, because I don't see it very much. I don't see a lot on your website that is video instruction oriented, or click here to see how to use this button, click here for an FAQ. And if that FAQ, remember who your target audience is, that these people are very, what's the word for it? The way I want to say, they're oriented not as much towards text. They want to have things explained to them. So if you can start, like, and Todd said this too, now that Zoom makes it so easy, he's going to be doing video interviews. Maybe you can just use Zoom to solo record you, screen share there right at your fingertips, and show how to do certain tasks. This is probably where you're having trouble, but that will cut down on the amount of times that you have to take somebody's hand and walk them through this site, and you paste it right up there and it becomes a feature. You do it once and everybody can just hit that video.
So that's when we come back to the live versus recorded dilemma, which we discussed earlier on. I had an invitation to do a webinar, and it was exactly the same topic as a webinar I had previously done and recorded. And that was the best possible version, I felt, of me explaining the site. But the person organizing that webinar wanted me live. So it's like, this is a kind of perennial issue, even with us teachers. Like, imagine that you've just given the best possible lecture you will ever give on the past perfect tense. Then you walk into a classroom, you switch on your computer and you play the students in the room the video of you explaining or giving a lesson on that topic. Do you not feel the students are in some way being cheated by you doing that, even though that is the best possible version of that lesson you have ever given or will ever give?
I gotta say that I'm with your webinar guy. I know that you feel that way about the video, but I know personally that if I was brought into a conference room and then they started playing a movie when you're sitting there 3 rows away from me, and I'm going, well, what the hell is this? I want to hear the guy. And I know it's not going to be the same lecture. And I know that there are going to be little nuances. Okay. And I know that maybe there are some things that you might actually miss, but I will tune in. I will be far sharper in concentrating on what is presented in front of me. There's actually a human being standing there saying these things, who I know I can ask questions of later. I just will not respond to a video the same way that I will a live presentation.
What I would add to that is, like, there's a time and a place, right? And so if I can't be at your webinar, or if I can't do what I'm doing with you today, then I'll opt for a YouTube version of your lesson.
Absolutely.
Right. In fact, I might even, after I do the real-time lesson with you, and David, there's a link to me doing the perfect version.
Yeah.
Then I got a backup there. I can go to refer to it later. I mean, I see that as a valuable. I mean, I loved it. Like, I love to watch things more than once if I have time. But if I get to meet the real person in real face to face, like, I mean, you know, we're in the presence of, you know, Paul Raine today, and it's a thrill to be able to sit here and talk to you. I've worked with you for like more than 5 years, but I've never sat and talked to you more than I have today, right? So,
which is bizarre. Like, here's my next kind of gambit. Imagine that the teacher, this is not me speaking now. This is some kind of hypothetical teacher, okay? And they sit down, and you're offering them a time-saving solution to some problem, okay? And this is their reply. Grading essays is part of my job. If a computer can grade essays as well as or better than I can, it is no longer part of my job. I have to find something else to do with that time, or risk looking redundant. I don't want to find something else to do with that time. Now, that's not an uncommon comment in my experience. Have you guys encountered that kind of opinion before?
I've encountered it, yeah.
Not specifically with that, but the conversation is coming up again with Nick D'Annunzio on a regular basis, is which part of our jobs can be made redundant and which parts can't be. And the things that can't be are the things we ought to be focusing on to be of value to students and to have a longevity in the field that we've chosen. Because if something can correct an essay better than I can, well, maybe it should, you know.
Yeah, exactly. If the teacher who gave you that response is sitting there trying to remain in denial about how technology is moving forward and its capacity to actually look at these essays and look for simple grammatical mistakes, which we then passed up, like in TOEFL, from computer rating to human rating. They're going to be facing, and I don't know if I said this to Nick or if I said it to Marasa yesterday. They're going to be faced with this dilemma where they're and I think, again, I'm always having trouble remembering this quote. I better go memorize it. But the idea that if robots are going to be replacing humans in any kind of a job, and robots are replacing, for example, simple law clerks, they're starting to replace X-ray and MRI technicians because they can find those little spots on dots a lot faster than humans can. If we are going to stay in denial about what these computers can do, that's going to give us even less time to figure out what it is that David just said, which is what can't computers do? That's what we should be specializing in, not denying the fact that computers can actually beat us in sometimes hundreds of times, thousands of times faster and more efficiently and more completely in finding small spelling mistakes, finding small grammatical mistakes. The person who was talking about grading an essay, they probably, if you ask them, not grading an essay, but just finding spelling mistakes in 10,000 word manuscript.
That's just an example. Yeah, exactly.
That's right, exactly.
Yeah.
And so, but that's already a given. Whereas maybe, I don't know, 30 or 40 years ago, people would have found it controversial or found the whole idea ridiculous. But now it's just a given. A 10,000 word manuscript, why would I want to look through that for spelling mistakes? I can put that through a word checker. So if this person is still thinking that, well, what am I good for? That's the question. What are you good for? If that's all that you can do, find something that you're good for.
Well, can I add to that? Like if let's say it's a 300 word, 5-paragraph essay, and the computer or the software can analyze it and correct it better than I can, but can it give comments? Can it give constructive feedback? Can it give suggestions on where you might take it from here, or how you might improve it, or what, where's your next step in the learning process? That's maybe what the teachers, maybe that's what our role is going to be resigned.
And maybe that's what they meant. We just don't understand completely what they're trying to convey.
And it comes back again to this kind of dichotomy between are we as teachers and our skill set, is it inseparable or is it piecemeal? So we have the synthesized voice that could potentially replace our voices. We have automatic grading. We have the speech recognition, which could replace our listening expertise. Piece by piece, we're taking away or eroding or substituting the skill set of a teacher. And we're saying we can automate that, we can automate that, we can automate that. We can't automate you being an inspiration, because I don't think people find computer programs inspiring the same way that they can find humans inspiring.
The other thing that, for example, this is what we were getting to yesterday with the guest was, can a computer tell you're having a hard day because you just broke up with your girlfriend or boyfriend, and then thus alter or modify the assignment to account for, say, the emotional moment, the emotional moment of the time, the emotional time that person's going through. So can a computer judge that maybe now is not the right time for this student to be pushed to complete something because they're going through an emotional, difficult time? So, but yesterday she was talking about the analyzing facial recognition to when kids are working online to discover when their emotional state changes, when they're tired, when they're fatiguing, when they're no longer interested. And computers are getting to the point of being able to do that. Mr. Juto, you're no longer interested in this topic. Maybe it's time for you to switch. This could be computerized.
That would be great, because you're going, yeah, you're right, I am kind of losing focus. Computer, would you mind if I did this tomorrow? And the computer says, yes, you still have some time until the deadline. And that would be fantastic. That would be great, right?
Then we start getting toward the kind of echo chamber, like where Facebook is predicting what kind of articles you like to read, what kind of personality you have, and then only feeding you that stuff.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, no, I want to be exposed to opinions that don't necessarily agree with my own,
That problem, sorry to interrupt, Paul, but that problem is directly a result of the way Facebook codes its algorithms. We don't have to create an echo chamber. We can actually write it into the algorithm so that you're occasionally given a well-articulated opposite opinion from yours, one that'll actually make you think. Algorithms can be written anyway. Zuckerberg wrote his algorithms to make him a ton of money and to make you angry. So then you're going to be writing comments and pushing likes and dislikes all over the place. That was Zuckerberg. It wasn't computer aided instruction as by nature. Paul, want to ask you a couple things, and probably, if you don't mind, it'll take maybe about another 20 minutes, if that's okay with you.
Sure.
Okay, you came up with a huge amount of response from our audience at OTJ when I said, "Hey, guess what? We're taking audience questions right now," and I if I got this kind of response, I'd be pretty damn proud of myself. But a lot of people wanted to ask you questions. Would you mind answering a couple of them?
Of course.
Okay. I don't think anybody will mind if I say their names, Dave?
I think by nature of responding to your question.
Okay. So Bill Pello, good friend of mine, Bill Pello asks, I can't do this in a Boston accent, so I'm not going to try. But I suddenly heard Bill Pello speaking in his Boston accent. Okay. If you were going to be a student, which of your tools would you want your teacher to use with you?
Good question.
Well, you're like a mother, right? You love all your children equally, right?
I like some of the stuff. I've developed a lot of tools with Oliver Rose, who has helped me with the design and the kind of gamifying aspect of a lot of my tools. So there are some interactive games where I can compete directly against my my classmates in real time. I like those games because they have a social aspect to them as well as a kind of pedagogical value as well. And also one of the earlier tools I developed called Lyric Learner, where you listen and you type the words missing in a song. I find that personally, very motivational. A lot of the stuff that I've developed subsequently has been assessment-based, not potentially as exciting or gamified. I had a few failures with also gamifying. I created a game where you had to run around like Mario, and you would punch a block and a question would come out the block, and you'd have to answer the question before you could continue the game. And the students hated it.
Oh,
they really hated it.
They
really hated it. Yeah. So I was like, oh my God, I spent all that time gamifying, and it was 80% game and 20%, learning. And it didn't work. So I think you can try too hard to make stuff fun. And I don't personally believe that teaching should be fun. I think it should be engaging and effective. Engaging and effective are preferable to fun.
I would agree with that.
Some level of rigor.
Rigorous, engaging. I mean, effective is the most. I mean, if this is another question I had, but I'll save it for the end of the interview. But yeah, I have one more question about that, but I'll save it.
Okay. Dave, did you want to take the next one from Kevin?
I'll take the next one. This is from Kevin Ryan. When you make a new tool, which hat do you put on first, the teacher or the developer? Which hat do you end up wearing? What about the in-between part of the process?
I think I started out as a teacher, so I had that hat on first, and then I started to use tools that other people had developed. So I was figuring out how they worked in my classroom, how they saved me time, etc. And then I started developing my own. There's just so many variables. It's not just teacher versus developer. It's user versus administrator versus teacher versus student on a mobile versus student on a laptop versus student on a really old mobile versus student on a tablet.
Right.
The number of roles you have to maintain in your head at any one time is just like basically infinite. Yeah.
Wow.
But I think Kevin's getting at, how do I take what I've learned as a teacher and incorporate that into my development ideas and vice versa.
Right.
So for me, I mean, there have been times when I've jumped on and do some coding directly after class. When I've noticed a problem or an idea and I've incorporated that into the code immediately.
Right.
So if I wasn't a teacher and a developer, I wouldn't be able to do that. I had to email my developer, and then they'd have to email me back, and it would be a lot more time consuming.
Right. That the fact that you're a teacher as well is very powerful. You've got the ability to translate your experience into a result when you're doing the coding and stuff, so you can get that immediately. That's amazing. That's great. That's cool. Go ahead, Jose.
Steve McGuire came up with a whole canoe full of questions for you, and I'd like to get through all of them, but because I want to give all the other ones a chance, I'm going to choose just one, and it's going to be my choice. Sorry, Steve, but I would like, Paul, when we, sorry, stop saying I, when we finally nail down the premiere date for this to appear on YouTube, if it's possible that you're there on YouTube answering chat questions, because then Steve McGuire can be there chatting with you on YouTube. I think that would, be a fantastic experience. So here's the one question I'm going to choose that he asked of you. Which of your applications have you seen the best reaction to? I mean, you actually saw their eyes open and they actually went on to try something and kept on at it. Which of your stuff have people found that was the best?
Again, coming back to the lyric learning application that I made, that was very, very motivational. Students really, really liked that one. Unfortunately, there are copyright implications, so I couldn't continue developing that as much as I wanted to, because I knew that I would eventually run into copyright problems. With song lyrics.
Well, you're certainly welcome to use.
I was just about to say
band songs.
I was about to say.
Thanks, Dave.
That's right.
Also,
I like the way Paul has. Yeah, thanks, Dave. Yeah.
Well, actually, no. Dave just has some videos on YouTube, but they're not subtitled.
Yeah.
But I can't use them unless they're subtitled, unfortunately.
Okay.
So the transcription system in YouTube isn't good enough to take songs as they're sung yet, because the transcription for spoken word is amazing.
It can. I just can't pull that data from the API. I can't get hold of that data. So yeah, it has to be manually transcribed.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And some of the other stuff, like I mentioned before, the kind of real-time games where students are competing against each other in a kind of live setting. And also, I developed a tool called WikiClose. And this is also on TeacherTools.digital. You can copy and paste from Wikipedia. But on Apps for EFL, which is my previous site, students can actually type in their own ideas. So if they're interested in learning about Lady Gaga or SMAP or whatever other topic that they're passionate about, they can type that topic in, and it will generate a closed test based on that topic.
Wow.
Yeah. But TeacherTools.digital is for teachers to create assignments for students. So that kind of learner autonomy is not part of the platform. The teachers have to kind of predict what their students will find engaging and then create the material that they perceive will be most engaging. Yeah.
Can I ask a question that's not on that list, but which is what's the next project that you have that you're working on, like that would be new?
I don't really have a new project in mind right now. Someone did mention on Facebook it would be great if students could kind of have 1 minute talking to one person and then get switched to another partner automatically. Like Zoom can't do this, and there's no application out there that can really do this.
Right.
So it'd be like in the classroom when you have two lines of students and they kind of move down the line like that. Have you done that before?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've done that. Yeah.
I'm not sure if there's a word for that activity.
Well, in my parlance, it's basically called verbal classrooms.
Yeah.
But that particular thing doesn't have a way of describing it. I've always thought, like if I come up with a lot of really good syntax for all of this stuff, it would be easier to sell. There isn't, but just seat switching. You just call it seat switching, maybe.
Seat switching, maybe also mingling. I think mingling was mentioned.
Some people have called it, it reminds me of speed dating, because it is literally what you do in speed dating.
Right.
Yeah. So that kind of...
I've never speed dated before, but I trust you on that one.
Yeah. I'm glad you didn't actually say, I've speed dated before, Jose. And yeah, you're right. And going, your wife is listening.
She's walking the dog right now.
There is a site called Chat Roulette, and I strongly advise teachers not to use this in their classroom.
Oh, don't use it. Okay.
Because it kind of devolved into adult-related activities.
Oh, all right.
But a lot of these sites end up going down that route.
Oh, well, that's just the way the internet progresses. Yeah.
That's the way the internet works. Lowest common denominator or whatever. But the concept was really cool. You would connect to the site, and then it would randomly pair you with somebody else to have a conversation. And if you got bored or if you want to move on, you click a button and it randomly pairs you with somebody else. So I was thinking, you could restrict that to a class of students, like 30 students, and then it would randomly pair them with every other student in the class for 1 minute to have a conversation.
Right. Cool.
I think it would be great if you could deliver that by October. I would use it. So you get to work, man.
I often get asked like, can you do this? Can you do that? Is this possible? Is that possible? And my answer is like, anything's possible given enough time and money.
Money, yeah.
Right. Okay. Well,
I could spend 1,000 hours developing this, but why would I want to do it? I mean,
that actually brings to the next question. If that's okay, Dave.
Go ahead.
Yesterday, Merasa Alizadeh, we ended the conversation about health problems.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually wanted to ask you this, and I know that you wanted to be asked this, that you have, even before, again, the pandemic, pretty much just driven yourself to coding using, what do you use, a mouse, a trackpad? What do you use for your
mouse?
You use a mouse, I use a trackpad, but you're typing all the time, you're mousing all the time, you're hunching over all the time, you're sitting all the time. And how do you find, if you can make any kind of comparison between your health before you became an EFL developer and your health these days in COVID, and what you can do in terms of recommending to people? Well, I had carpal, I'm not saying you did, but let's say you did have a carpal tunnel syndrome or some problem, and this is what I did. You're kind of a pioneer in this because you're probably spending way more time on your computer than any of us do, even though we think we're nailed to our seats. How would you approach that topic?
I do spend an inordinate amount of time in front of a computer, more than 12 hours a day.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
And yeah, I think during my apps for EFL coding binges, I would sometimes stay up until 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, and that would be after a full day of teaching at Oberlin.
Right.
And then again for TeacherTools Digital, I would stay up a long time coding. You have to, I think. I believe this. I just don't act in accordance with this belief.
Oh dear.
Health is the most important thing. Everything else we do in life, none of it matters without health. Like even for money, like you want to earn money to improve your mental and physical health. Really, I mean, you want to buy a nice house to live in. Why? To improve your mental and physical health. You want to spend money on good food and nice vacations. Why? To improve your mental and physical health. Everything comes down to health, I think, ultimately.
And so sometimes the means to get there destroys our health.
Exactly.
So sitting at a computer for 12 hours, depending on unless you have some activities to kind of reduce the stress, do you have any things that you do to reduce stress, for example?
At the moment, not really, and I think I'm at risk of burnout. To be honest.
Okay. Yeah, well,
I'm glad we asked you.
I'll tell you what. I'm about to make a video on some things I learned as a musician to keep my body from getting injured. Although I did find using the trackpad caused me some wrist pain, and so I reverted back to a mouse. But Paul, I have a question for you, and it came up through our chat on Facebook the other day, which is, what's your, I don't know, how do you feel the future is going to be after COVID-19 in terms of employment, in terms of providing good education for students, and so on and so forth?
With the dual risks, I guess we have 3 risks now. We have the possibility of another pandemic. We have the risk from AI and technical incursions on teachers' traditional roles, and we have the population time bomb. I'm much more pessimistic about the population than maybe Dave is, but I hope Dave is right and I'm wrong. Just I think my experience is coloured by having worked at one school that closed down due to lack of enrolment, and another which is trying to get rid of us and replace us with dispatch workers. And I'm kind of like Chicken Little, and the sky's falling in, and no one's listening to me. I feel like
you're not Chicken Little, man. I hope you and the rest of the audience listening to this right now can stay sharp on our podcast group podcast page on Facebook and follow us on Facebook, because I want them to listen to the rest of the answer to your question, which I rudely interrupted. But just to say this, you are not Chicken Little, because I think I'm thinking about it. I agree with you on a lot of these issues. And at least in terms of the way academic institutions are treating us, one of our guests will soon be a fellow named Gregory Hadley. Really nice guy, and I'm not gonna spill all the beans right now, but there's a guy you should listen to when it comes to really, really interesting and I think really, really sharp ideas on how he feels academia could be treating their instructors, not just in Japan, but also through the West. And I'm pretty sure he'll agree with a lot of the things that you're thinking.
Dave, were you more focused on the pandemic issue, the population issue, or the technology issue in that question?
Pandemic.
Okay. Whether we will retain some of the practices that we've developed going back to face-to-face, is that what you mean?
I guess so, yeah. Yeah. And
I certainly will, because I was using them before the COVID anyway. You know? And it's a question of, what do you find more efficient and effective as an individual teacher? Would you rather cut out paragraphs on paper, or would you rather do it on a smartphone? And are smartphones more of a distraction than they're worth? You know, in the classroom, can we keep students focused on learning on these devices and away from meaningless games and distractions? You know, for me, that it's worth it. I think it's worth it, but other teachers might disagree.
I think it depends on how you run your classroom. There, obviously, I'm just looking at this podcast. There's so much that just even your site, and definitely your site, you could spend like several years in a teaching career just using your site and bringing really cool, really effective digital tools to students. So there's obviously something there, and there's a whole plethora. It's called the internet that we could use to enhance our students' education. But if you're thinking, yeah, but these kids are going to start chatting online and they're going to start looking at YouTube videos, you got to ask yourself, why do they have that opportunity in your classroom? Why is there so much downtime that you allow them? Or why is it that they think that they can get away with that? Because they think, oh yeah, but I can do that for homework, so I'll just chat. It's the same problem with talking to their friends next to them. If your classroom is so distracted that they start talking to their friends or they start writing notes, it's the same problem. It just happens to be on a smartphone that they'll start writing notes on a smartphone, i.e. Line or i.e. Snapchat, or they'll start looking at cat videos on YouTube, i.e. they're doodling in their textbooks. So you got to ask yourself, that's a byproduct of how you run your classroom, or it's partly a byproduct of how you run your classroom. So ask yourself that. It's not the phone necessarily. It's what your students can do in your classroom.
I do agree with that, and there's that kind of old cartoon of the kid with the textbook and the comic inside it.
Yeah.
So students have always found ways to look at things they shouldn't be looking at in the classroom.
Yeah.
But that smartphones are kind of like supercharged distraction machine. They can be. I'm able to keep students on task by developing engaging applications.
Right.
And this challenge of gamifying the learning process, you know, that's a very important endeavor, I think. And many edtech companies are working on that. So you have like badges, you have achievements, you have personalization, all of these things to make the learning process more engaging. But to compete with applications that require the brain to be in a kind of lazy state. You know that book by, is it Kaufman? Thinking Fast and Slow?
Kahneman, Daniel Kahneman.
He talks about how the brain prefers to be in a kind of relaxed state. So it will do whatever it can to switch into that state. I
actually, we're getting to that point in the podcast. Although, Dave, I don't know if you wanted to like approach any other topics.
I think for now we're good. I think like we've been thinking, you're definitely coming back for another one.
Yeah, that's I was about
down the road.
I was about to introduce that whole topic because when you're talking about things like Duolingo, at first I was really big on Duolingo, and I was introducing that to my students because it's super engaging, and guess what, kids, it's free. But then it was revealed to me in a really interesting Boston Review article, which I thought if we had time, we would talk about it. But I guess we'll have to talk about it when you come back, because your opinion is specific to this. And when you're creating engagement, when you're creating student almost addiction to certain applications like Duolingo, it's the same thing with Snapchat, it's the same thing with Facebook. What are you actually promoting in terms of their relationship to that phone is their relationship to their peers? And then you find out that things like Duolingo has a very, very dark sort of secret in the closet about how it basically turns all of its network of users and contributors into kind of a digital sweatshop, which I think we should touch on more completely in a better setting when we have more time for it. But obviously, there's so many topics that you are very well qualified to talk about. You've obviously provided an awful lot of food for thought for our audience, and I think it would be great if you came back. Do you think you could come back?
I would love to come back. And I just want to comment that I did read that article.
Yeah.
And it did change my opinion of Duolingo a little bit. But I kind of knew where Duolingo started out from anyway. I kind of knew about that. But yeah, it is a very important point you make. Yeah.
I think at first, Duolingo's idea is, well, let's be just like Linux. Let's just like be the open source community. And that was really fair. But then it turned out that they started leveraging that to actually make money. Now, I don't know if they were that nefarious as to actually fake a lot of people and say, oh, we're just like the open source community, when really, they were twirling their wax mustaches and saying, we're going to control the digital world. But that's something that we can discuss,
Well, the line between engaging and addictive, that's a very, very fine line. And if you want, as a company, your product to be financially successful, make it addictive. Addictive is like people can't stop using it.
Just ask the Mexican cartels, man.
Without getting into the drug trade.
Well, when you're talking addiction, those guys laid out the path for us, right?
Well, the British got the opium.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. But,
Hong Kong.
But I have one question for you actually before we end. Is it okay?
Yeah, sure.
So this is a kind of hypothetical question. Let me find this one. Imagine a perfect, again, this is one of my kind of imagine it's perfect kind of questions. So imagine a perfect technological intervention that brought about language competency in our students. Would teachers actually recommend it, knowing it would make them redundant?
You know what? So, you know what I want to do? Because apparently we're getting into a little time pressure here. Maybe not just me, but other parts of this conversation. I will take that question and I will rephrase it so it's actually written up above us. And I would like Dave to think about it. I would like time to think about it because it's a deep question. I would like our audience to think about it so that then they can discuss it on Facebook. And then when you do come back, we will start with that question, and we'll go with other questions, because this is where it gets really, really interesting. Is the deep questions, not just well, how do you take attendance? I mean, it's important stuff, but like this is where your intellect and where your sharpness really, really shines and can become part of an even deeper conversation next time. What do you think?
Thank you. That sounds good. I mean, we're into 2.5 hours. I think. Isn't
that amazing? It's just boom, just like oh my God, it's 4:30. It's
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Paul.
And TeacherTools.digital is
right
my
up there. It's
my
right
current
up there.
project.
Take a look up there. Okay, it's right up there. Okay,
we're gonna have it. It's great to have you on today.
It was fantastic. Thank you very much. Okay, bye everybody.
Bye bye.
See ya.